Since the 1940s, military pilots and ordinary people have reported seeing things in the sky they can't explain. What seemed like just strange stories has turned into thousands of cases documented by the government itself. Objects that fly faster than our most modern planes, make impossible turns, and disappear in seconds. This forced scientists to ask a frightening question. If these things aren't ours, whose are they? Welcome to this quiet corner where mysteries unfold slowly and the night holds more questions than answers. Tonight, we're stepping into shadows that stretch across decades, into encounters that have puzzled witnesses, investigators, and governments alike. We're exploring the unexplained aerial phenomena that have been documented since the 1940s, objects in our skies that move in ways our technology cannot explain, witnessed by trained pilots and ordinary people whose lives were forever changed by what they saw. These are not stories from the fringes of imagination. These are documented encounters, recorded by military personnel, tracked by radar systems, and investigated by government agencies that once dismissed such reports but now acknowledge their reality. We're talking about objects that accelerate beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft, that make impossible 90-degree turns at tremendous speeds, that appear and disappear in ways that challenge our understanding of physics itself. The modern era of these encounters began in the summer of 1947 when private pilot Kenneth Arnold spotted 9 crescent-shaped objects flying in formation near Mount Rainier in Washington state. Arnold, an experienced aviator with over 4,000 hours of flight time, watched these objects move at speeds he estimated at over 1,700 miles per hour, far exceeding any aircraft of that era. When he described their motion as resembling saucers skipping across water, the phrase flying saucers entered our vocabulary, though Arnold himself described them as crescent-shaped rather than disc-like. What made Arnold's sighting significant wasn't just his credibility as a pilot, but the precise way he described the encounter. He noted the time, calculated the speed based on known landmarks, and provided details that investigators could verify. The objects maintained perfect formation while covering vast distances in impossibly short time frames. When Arnold landed and reported what he'd seen, he had no idea he was opening a door to a phenomenon that would challenge our understanding of what shares our skies. Just days after Arnold's encounter, something crashed near Roswell, New Mexico, launching what would become perhaps the most famous incident in the history of unexplained aerial phenomena. Initially reported as a recovered flying disc by the Roswell Army Airfield, the military quickly retracted the statement, claiming it was merely a weather balloon. For decades, this explanation satisfied most people, but documents released years later revealed that the debris was actually from a classified military program designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests. Yet witnesses continued to insist that what they saw that day was unlike any weather balloon or conventional aircraft. The Roswell incident established a pattern that would repeat for decades. Initial reports of unusual objects or crashes would be followed by official explanations that often seemed inadequate to the witnesses involved. This cycle of encounter, investigation, and official dismissal created an atmosphere of skepticism toward government explanations, even when those explanations might have been accurate. But Roswell was just the beginning. Throughout the late 1940s and early 1950s, reports of unusual aerial objects multiplied across the United States and around the world. Military pilots, commercial aviators, and ground observers reported objects that exhibited flight characteristics far beyond anything in the known arsenal of any nation. These objects moved without visible propulsion systems, changed direction instantaneously, and often appeared on radar screens as solid objects before vanishing without explanation. One of the most compelling cases occurred over Washington, D.C. in July of 1952. For 2 consecutive weekends, radar operators at both Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base tracked multiple unknown objects moving through restricted airspace around the nation's capital. The objects appeared on radar as solid targets, moving at speeds ranging from very slow to over 7,000 miles per hour. Fighter jets were scrambled to intercept, but the objects seemed to evade them with ease, sometimes disappearing from radar only to reappear elsewhere moments later. Captain Edward Ruppelt, who headed the Air Force's official investigation into these phenomena, later wrote that the Washington incidents represented some of the most credible radar visual cases in the military's files. Multiple independent radar systems tracked the same objects simultaneously, ruling out equipment malfunction. Ground observers and aircrew visually confirmed many of the radar radar contacts, providing corroboration that these were not merely electronic anomalies. The Washington incidents forced the military to take these reports more seriously. Project Blue Book, the Air Force's systematic investigation into unexplained aerial phenomena, documented over 12,700 reports between 1952 and 1969. While the majority of cases were eventually explained as conventional aircraft, weather phenomena, or misidentifications, a significant percentage remained unresolved despite thorough investigation. Captain Ruppelt and his team developed standardized investigation procedures, interviewing witnesses, analyzing radar data, and consulting with experts in various fields. They found that the most credible reports often came from experienced observers, particularly military and commercial pilots, whose training made them reliable witnesses to aerial phenomena. These professionals understood aircraft performance characteristics and were less likely to misidentify conventional objects or atmospheric conditions. One pattern that emerged from the Blue Book investigations was the consistent description of flight characteristics that defied conventional understanding. Witnesses repeatedly reported objects that accelerated from stationary positions to tremendous speeds instantaneously, made sharp, angular turns that would generate G-forces fatal to any human pilot, and hovered silently before shooting away at impossible velocities. These performance characteristics appeared again and again in independent reports from around the world. The Leveland incident in Texas during November of 1957 demonstrated another puzzling aspect of these encounters. Multiple witnesses across Leveland reported seeing a glowing object that seemed to cause electrical interference with vehicles and equipment. Cars stalled, headlights dimmed, and radios went silent as the object passed overhead. When it moved away, the electrical systems resumed normal operation. This pattern of electromagnetic effects would be reported in hundreds of similar cases over the following decades. Law enforcement officers Jim Wheeler and A.J. Fowler were among the Leveland witnesses. Both men were familiar with the area and experienced in evaluating unusual situations. They independently observed a bright object hovering over the highway that caused their patrol car's electrical system to fail. When the object departed, their car started normally. Neither officer could explain what they had witnessed, but both were certain it was unlike anything in their previous experience. The Leveland case highlighted another troubling aspect of these encounters. The electromagnetic effects suggested an advanced technology that could remotely interfere with electrical systems across significant distances. No known aircraft possessed such capabilities in 1957, and even today, such technology would be considered highly advanced. Yet multiple witnesses reported these effects with remarkable consistency. Throughout the 1960s, military encounters with unexplained aerial phenomena continued to accumulate in classified files. Fighter pilots reported objects that could outmaneuver their aircraft with ease, sometimes seeming to toy with military jets by matching their maneuvers before accelerating away. Radar operators tracked objects that violated basic principles of aerodynamics, changing direction without deceleration and achieving speeds that should have created sonic booms that were never heard. One of the most significant military encounters occurred in 1964 over Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, which housed nuclear weapons. Captain Robert Jameson was on duty when security personnel reported strange lights hovering over the missile fields. As Jameson and other officers watched, several nuclear missiles went offline simultaneously, their guidance systems mysteriously malfunctioning. The objects observed that night exhibited the same flight characteristics reported in civilian encounters, moving silently and changing direction in ways that defied conventional aircraft capabilities. The Malmstrom incident was particularly disturbing to military officials because it occurred at one of America's most secure installations and seemed to demonstrate that whatever was responsible for these phenomena could disable critical defense systems. Similar incidents were reported at other nuclear facilities, suggesting a pattern of interest in humanity's most destructive weapons. The implications were unsettling, regardless of whether these objects represented foreign technology or something else entirely. Commercial aviation also contributed numerous reports during this period. Airline pilots, with thousands of hours of flight experience and extensive knowledge of aircraft recognition, reported encounters that left them baffled. Captain Clarence Chills and First Officer John Whitted of Eastern Airlines described seeing a cigar-shaped object with windows and a blue flame trailing from its rear while flying over Alabama in 1948. The object passed their DC-3 at tremendous speed, creating turbulence that rocked their aircraft. The Chills-Whitted encounter was notable because both pilots were highly experienced aviators with spotless safety records. They provided detailed descriptions that investigators could analyze, including estimates of the object's size, speed, and flight path. Their account was corroborated by ground witnesses who reported seeing an unusual object in the same area at approximately the same time. Despite extensive investigation, no conventional explanation could account for what they observed. Air traffic controllers also reported tracking objects that behaved unlike any known aircraft. These professionals, trained to monitor air traffic and identify different types of aircraft, observed radar returns that defied standard flight patterns. Objects would hover motionless for extended periods before accelerating to incredible speeds, or perform maneuvers that would be impossible for conventional aircraft to execute safely. The consistency of these reports across different branches of the military and civilian aviation suggested that witnesses were observing something real and measurable. The objects cast shadows, reflected sunlight, appeared on photographic film, and registered on radar systems. They were not mere optical illusions or misidentifications of conventional phenomena. Whatever was being observed possessed physical characteristics that could be detected by multiple independent sensing methods. By the end of the 1960s, thousands of unexplained encounters had been documented by military and civilian investigators. The Air Force closed Project Blue Book, claiming that no evidence supported the existence of extraordinary aerial phenomena. However, the closure was widely viewed as an attempt to reduce public interest rather than a genuine conclusion based on the evidence. Many of the most compelling cases remained unexplained despite extensive investigation. The patterns that emerged from decades of documentation painted a picture of aerial phenomena that consistently exceeded known technological capabilities. The objects demonstrated flight characteristics that would require revolutionary breakthroughs in propulsion, materials science, and energy systems. They showed apparent intelligence in their movements and interactions with human aircraft and installations. Most troubling, they seemed to show particular interest in military installations and nuclear weapons facilities. As we move deeper into these documented encounters, we find that the questions only multiply. Each carefully investigated case adds another piece to a puzzle that challenges our assumptions about what is possible in our skies and what intelligence might share our world. The witnesses were not seeking attention or fame. They were experienced professionals doing their jobs who encountered something that fundamentally challenged their understanding of technology and physics. The patterns documented over these decades continue to this day, with new generations of witnesses reporting encounters that echo the experiences of Kenneth Arnold, Captain Jameson, and thousands of others. The technology may have advanced, but the mystery remains as compelling as ever. These encounters suggest that our skies hold secrets that we are only beginning to acknowledge, mysteries that have been unfolding silently above us for generations. The 1970s brought a new level of sophistication to the investigation of unexplained aerial phenomena, along with encounters that would forever change how both the military and civilian researchers approached these mysteries. As radar technology improved and more sensitive detection equipment became available, the data collected from these encounters became increasingly difficult to dismiss or explain through conventional means. One of the most extraordinary encounters of this decade occurred in October of 1973 near Mansfield, Ohio, involving an Army Reserve helicopter crew conducting a routine training flight. Captain Lawrence Coyne, an experienced pilot with over 19 years of flight experience, was commanding a UH-1 Huey helicopter when Staff Sergeant Robert Yanaksek spotted a red light approaching from the southeast. What began as a routine observation quickly escalated into one of the most well-documented military encounters with an unexplained aerial phenomenon. The crew initially assumed the approaching light was another aircraft, but as it drew closer, they realized it was moving far too fast to be any conventional helicopter or small plane. Captain Coyne began a defensive descent to avoid what appeared to be an imminent collision, dropping from 2,500 feet towards 1,600 feet while attempting radio contact with nearby air traffic control. The radio systems, however, had mysteriously stopped functioning, cutting the crew off from ground communication at the moment they needed it most. As the object closed to within 500 feet of their helicopter, it suddenly stopped and hovered directly above them. The crew found themselves bathed in a green light emanating from the underside of what they described as a metallic, cigar-shaped craft approximately 60 feet in length. The object had a red light at its front, a white light at its rear, and the green light appeared to be scanning their aircraft. Most remarkably, despite Captain Coyne's efforts to descend, the helicopter began climbing uncontrollably, rising from 1,600 feet to 3,500 feet, while the crew watched their instruments in bewilderment. Staff Sergeant Yanaksek, serving as flight medic, noted that the helicopter's magnetic compass was spinning wildly during the encounter, and the aircraft's engine and rotor systems were operating normally despite the unusual climb. After several minutes that felt like hours to the crew, the object accelerated toward the northwest at tremendous speed, leaving the helicopter crew to process what they had experienced. When radio communication resumed, air traffic controllers confirmed they had lost radar contact with the helicopter during the time frame of the encounter. The Coyne incident was particularly significant because it involved 4 trained military personnel who provided consistent, detailed accounts of their experience. Captain Coyne, First Lieutenant Arrigo Jezzi, Staff Sergeant Robert Yanaksek, and Specialist John Healy all corroborated the details of the encounter. Ground witnesses in the area also reported seeing unusual lights and confirmed observing the helicopter involved in some kind of interaction with an unknown object. What made this case even more compelling was the physical evidence. The helicopter's flight instruments recorded the unusual altitude changes, and maintenance personnel found no mechanical explanation for the uncontrolled climb. The failure and subsequent restoration of radio communication coincided precisely with the object's presence and departure. The crew's professional backgrounds and their willingness to undergo extensive debriefing and investigation added credibility to their account. The Coyne helicopter incident demonstrated several characteristics that had become common in military encounters with these phenomena. The object exhibited precise control and apparent awareness of the helicopter's presence. It showed advanced technology in its ability to interfere with radio communications and possibly influence the aircraft's flight path. Most importantly, it displayed flight capabilities that exceeded any known aircraft of that era, accelerating to tremendous speeds after hovering motionless. Around the same time period, civilian researchers began organizing more systematic investigations into these phenomena. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who had served as a scientific consultant to Project Blue Book, established the Center for UFO Studies and developed classification systems that helped standardize the reporting and analysis of encounters. His work brought academic rigor to a field that had often been dismissed by mainstream science. Dr. Hynek's classification system distinguished between different types of encounters based on proximity and interaction. Nocturnal lights observed at a distance were categorized differently from daylight disk sightings, which in turn were separate from radar visual cases where objects were simultaneously observed visually and tracked electronically. This systematic approach helped researchers identify patterns and focus on the most evidential cases. The Belgian wave of sightings from 1989 to 1991 represented another milestone in the documentation of these phenomena. Over a period of 2 years, thousands of witnesses across Belgium reported large triangular objects moving silently through the night sky. These objects, described as having lights at each corner and sometimes a central light, were observed by police officers, military personnel, and civilians from all walks of life. What made the Belgian encounters particularly significant was the response of the Belgian military. Rather than dismissing the reports, they took them seriously and launched an official investigation. On the night of March 30th and 31st, 1990, Belgian Air Force F-16 fighters were scrambled to intercept radar contacts that ground controllers could not identify. The pilots achieved radar lock on the unknown objects, recording flight characteristics that defied conventional aircraft performance. The radar data from the Belgian encounters showed objects accelerating from approximately 150 miles per hour to over 1,000 miles per hour in seconds, while simultaneously changing altitude by thousands of feet. The G-forces required for such maneuvers would have been lethal to any human pilot, yet the objects performed these accelerations repeatedly. When the F-16 pilots attempted to close for visual identification, the objects would change course and speed in ways that made interception impossible. General Wilfried de Brouwer, who headed the Belgian Air Force investigation, later stated publicly that the radar returns were consistent with solid objects exhibiting extraordinary flight capabilities. The fact that multiple radar systems tracked the same objects simultaneously ruled out equipment malfunction or atmospheric phenomena. Ground witnesses provided visual confirmation of the radar contacts, creating a comprehensive documentation of encounters with objects that exceeded known technological capabilities. The Belgian military's openness about their investigation marked a significant shift in official attitudes towards these phenomena. Rather than explaining away the encounters or classifying the information, they shared their findings with the public and acknowledged that they had documented objects whose performance characteristics could not be explained by conventional means. This transparency encouraged other military organizations to be more forthcoming about their own encounters. During this same period, commercial aviation continued to contribute significant cases to the growing database of unexplained encounters. Japan Airlines Flight 1628, a cargo flight from Paris to Tokyo, experienced one of the most dramatic airline encounters with unexplained aerial phenomena in November of 1986. Captain Kenju Terauchi, a veteran pilot with over 10,000 hours of flight experience, was flying over Alaska when he observed lights that initially appeared to be military aircraft. The lights, however, began exhibiting behavior that no conventional aircraft could duplicate. They paced the Boeing 747 cargo plane for several minutes, maintaining precise formation while performing maneuvers that seemed to demonstrate advanced propulsion technology. Captain Terauchi described seeing what appeared to be two smaller craft with square arrays of lights, followed by a much larger object that he estimated to be twice the size of an aircraft carrier. The encounter was tracked by both military and civilian radar systems, confirming that solid objects were indeed present in the vicinity of Flight 1628. Air traffic controllers observed the radar returns and communicated with Captain Terauchi about the unknown traffic. The Federal Aviation Administration conducted an extensive investigation, interviewing the crew and analyzing radar data. Despite thorough investigation, no conventional explanation could account for the object's flight characteristics or their interaction with the commercial aircraft. Captain Terauchi's account was particularly detailed because the encounter lasted for more than 30 minutes, giving him ample opportunity to observe the object's behavior. He noted that the smaller craft seemed to be generating intense heat, which he could feel through the cockpit windows. The larger object appeared and disappeared from visual and radar contact multiple times during the encounter, suggesting technology that could somehow mask its presence from detection systems. The JAL 1628 case demonstrated another pattern common in these encounters: the apparent intelligence behind the object's behavior. Rather than following predictable flight paths, the objects seemed to respond to the aircraft's movements and the crew's observations. When Captain Terauchi requested permission to change course to avoid the objects, they adjusted their own positions accordingly. This interactive behavior suggested a level of awareness and control that went beyond automatic or programmed responses. Military installations continued to experience encounters that raised serious questions about air defense capabilities and the nature of the objects being observed. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming, home to nuclear missile installations, reported multiple incidents during the 1970s and 80s where unknown objects were observed near weapons storage areas and missile silos. Security personnel described seeing large, silent objects with powerful lights that seemed to survey the installations methodically. These incidents were particularly troubling because they occurred at some of America's most secure military facilities and appeared to demonstrate sophisticated reconnaissance capabilities. The objects showed detailed knowledge of installation layouts and seemed particularly interested in areas where nuclear weapons were stored or deployed. The ability to penetrate restricted airspace around such heavily defended facilities suggested technology far advanced beyond conventional aircraft. Former missile launch officer Captain Robert Salas revealed details of an incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, where nuclear missiles went offline during an encounter with unexplained aerial phenomena. According to Salas, security personnel reported a red glowing object hovering near the missile facilities, while multiple nuclear weapons systems experienced simultaneous malfunctions. The technical systems failed in ways that should have been impossible, and they resumed normal operation only after the object departed. The nuclear weapons connection appeared in multiple cases across different military installations and time periods. F.E. Warren Air Force Base, Minot Air Force Base, and other strategic facilities reported similar encounters where unknown objects were observed in proximity to nuclear weapons systems. The consistency of these reports across different bases and personnel suggested a pattern of interest in humanity's most destructive capabilities. These military encounters raised profound questions about national security and the nature of the intelligence behind these phenomena. If foreign adversaries possessed such advanced technology, their surveillance capabilities would represent an unprecedented intelligence advantage. If the objects represented something else entirely, the implications were even more staggering. Either scenario suggested that conventional air defense systems were inadequate to address the challenge posed by these phenomena. As documentation of these encounters accumulated, patterns emerged that challenged conventional understanding of technology and physics. The objects consistently demonstrated flight characteristics that violated known principles of aerodynamics and propulsion. They accelerated without visible means of propulsion, changed direction without deceleration, and achieved speeds that should have created sonic booms that were rarely, if ever, heard by witnesses. The electromagnetic effects reported in many encounters suggested technology that could remotely influence electrical systems across significant distances. Cars, aircraft, and military equipment experienced malfunctions that coincided precisely with the presence of these objects. Radio communications were disrupted, radar systems were jammed or confused, and in some cases, entire power grids were affected. These effects implied an understanding of electromagnetic phenomena that exceeded current human knowledge. The materials and construction of these objects, as described by witnesses, also suggested advanced technology. Reports consistently described craft that appeared to be constructed from seamless metallic materials with no visible joints, rivets, or conventional aircraft features like wings, engines, or landing gear. The objects seemed to change shape or configuration during flight, adapting their form to different flight requirements. Witness testimony from trained observers repeatedly described objects that emitted no sound despite achieving tremendous velocities. Military and commercial pilots, who were intimately familiar with aircraft engine noise and aerodynamic effects, reported that these objects moved in complete silence even when passing at close range. This characteristic alone suggested propulsion technology that operated on principles unknown to conventional aerospace engineering. The accumulation of these documented encounters created a database of anomalous aerial phenomena that could not be dismissed as misidentification, hallucination, or hoax. The witnesses included some of the most credible observers in society: military officers, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, and law enforcement personnel. Their professional training made them reliable observers of aerial phenomena, and their careers often suffered as a result of reporting what they had witnessed. The consistency of reports across decades, continents, and cultures suggested that witnesses were observing real phenomena with measurable physical characteristics. The objects cast shadows, reflected sunlight, appeared on photographic film and video, and registered on multiple types of detection equipment. They were not psychological phenomena or misperceptions, but physical objects that could be observed and measured through multiple independent methods. As we examine these documented encounters from the 1970s and 80s, we see the emergence of a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of technology, physics, and possibly intelligence itself. The patterns established during this period continue to appear in encounters reported today, suggesting that whatever is responsible for these phenomena has maintained consistent capabilities and behaviors across decades of observation. The mystery has only deepened as our ability to document and analyze these encounters has improved. The 1990s marked a turning point in how these phenomena were studied and understood, as advances in recording technology began capturing encounters in unprecedented detail. Video cameras became more accessible to the general public, while military and government agencies developed increasingly sophisticated detection systems that could track and analyze these objects with greater precision than ever before. Yet rather than providing clear answers, this improved documentation only deepened the mystery by revealing capabilities that seemed to transcend our understanding of physics and engineering. The Phoenix Lights incident of March 13, 1997, became one of the most witnessed and well-documented encounters in history. Thousands of people across Arizona observed a series of unusual lights moving across the night sky in two distinct phases. The first involved a massive V-shaped formation of lights that passed silently over Phoenix and surrounding areas, witnessed by everyone from the governor of Arizona to airline pilots to ordinary citizens who happened to be looking up at the right moment. Dr. Lin Kai-tae, a physician living in Phoenix, had been documenting unusual aerial phenomena in the area for months before the mass sighting occurred. On the night of March 13th, she observed and photographed lights that appeared to be under intelligent control, moving in formations that defied conventional aircraft behavior. Her documentation, combined with testimony from hundreds of other witnesses, created a comprehensive record of an encounter that lasted for several hours and covered hundreds of miles. The first phase of the Phoenix Lights began around 8 in the evening when witnesses in northern Arizona reported seeing a massive triangular formation of lights moving slowly and silently toward the south. As the formation passed over different communities, thousands of people came out of their homes to observe what many described as a craft of enormous size, possibly over a mile in width. The object moved with complete silence despite its apparent massive size, contradicting everything known about large aircraft and the noise they inevitably produce. Commercial and military pilots in the area reported the formation to air traffic control, but radar operators initially had difficulty tracking the objects. When radar contact was achieved, the returns showed objects moving at speeds inconsistent with conventional aircraft, sometimes appearing stationary and then accelerating to tremendous velocities. The radar data corroborated witness accounts of objects that seemed to operate outside the normal parameters of aerodynamic flight. Governor Fife Symington, himself a former Air Force pilot with extensive aviation experience, was among the witnesses to the Phoenix Lights. Initially, he publicly dismissed the sightings to avoid panic, but years later he revealed that he had personally observed the formation and believed it represented technology beyond current human capabilities. His testimony carried particular weight because of his military background and his position as a public official with access to classified information about conventional aircraft operations. The second phase of the Phoenix Lights occurred later the same evening when a series of stationary lights appeared over the Phoenix area, remaining visible for several hours. These lights were captured on numerous videotapes by witnesses who had the presence of mind to document what they were seeing. The video evidence showed lights that appeared and disappeared in sequence, maintained perfect positioning relative to each other, and exhibited luminosity characteristics unlike conventional aircraft lighting or flares. The military's explanation that the lights were flares dropped during training exercises satisfied some observers, but many witnesses rejected this explanation based on their direct observations. Flares descend under parachutes and burn out relatively quickly, while these lights maintained their positions for extended periods and did not exhibit the characteristic descent pattern of illumination flares. The lights also appeared at different times and locations than the military exercises, suggesting that multiple phenomena might have been occurring simultaneously. The Phoenix Lights incident demonstrated the challenges of investigating mass sighting events. With thousands of witnesses observing from different locations and perspectives, accounts varied in details while maintaining consistency in describing objects that exceeded conventional aircraft capabilities. The sheer number of credible witnesses, including law enforcement officers, pilots, and government officials, made it impossible to dismiss the sightings as misidentification or hoax. During this same period, the Rendlesham Forest incident in England provided another extensively documented encounter involving military personnel at a strategic installation. In December of 1980, United States Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Bentwaters reported multiple encounters with unexplained objects in the forest adjacent to the base. The incident unfolded over several nights and involved numerous witnesses, official reports, and physical evidence that was investigated for years afterward. Deputy Base Commander Lieutenant Colonel Charles Holt led an investigation team into Rendlesham Forest after initial reports of unusual lights and possible aircraft crash. Instead of finding conventional wreckage, the team encountered objects that exhibited extraordinary characteristics. Colonel Holt documented his observations on audio tape as they occurred, creating a real-time record of an encounter with phenomena that defied explanation. The audio recordings captured Colonel Holt's growing amazement as he described objects that pulsed with coloured lights, moved between trees without making contact, and seemed to respond to the investigation team's presence. At one point, he described a beam of light that appeared to emanate from one of the objects and sweep the ground near the weapons storage area of the base. The beam was observed by multiple witnesses and appeared to be scanning specific areas of the installation. Physical evidence at the Rendlesham site included depressions in the ground where objects had allegedly landed, burn marks on trees, and elevated radiation readings at the landing sites. The depressions formed a triangular pattern and appeared to have been created by significant weight pressing into the forest floor. Plaster casts were made of the impressions, and the burn marks on surrounding trees were documented photographically. The radiation readings, taken with military detection equipment, showed levels significantly above background at the alleged landing sites. These readings remained elevated for days after the encounters, suggesting that whatever had been present had left measurable traces of its presence. The combination of visual observations, audio recordings, physical traces, and radiation evidence created one of the most thoroughly documented cases in the military files. What made the Rendlesham incident particularly significant was the professional caliber of the witnesses involved. Lieutenant Colonel Holt was a career military officer with top-secret clearance serving as deputy commander of a nuclear weapons installation. His credibility was beyond reproach, and his willingness to document and report the encounter despite potential career consequences demonstrated the profound impact of what he witnessed. The incident also highlighted the global nature of these phenomena, occurring at a joint British and American military installation and involving personnel from both nations. The objects showed the same flight characteristics and electromagnetic effects that had been reported in encounters around the world, suggesting that whatever intelligence was behind these phenomena was operating on a global scale. Technology improvements during the 1990s also enabled more sophisticated analysis of photographic and video evidence. The Mexico City eclipse sighting of July 11, 1991 was captured by numerous video cameras as millions of people gathered to observe a total solar eclipse. As the eclipse reached totality, many observers noticed unusual objects visible against the darkened sky that were not apparent during normal daylight conditions. Television journalist Jaime Maussan collected and analyzed dozens of video recordings from different locations around Mexico City, revealing objects that appeared to be metallic and disc-shaped. The objects were visible to multiple cameras simultaneously, ruling out individual equipment malfunctions or optical illusions. The consistency of the object's appearance across different recording devices and locations suggested that something genuinely anomalous had been captured during the eclipse. The Mexico City videos were subjected to extensive computer analysis that revealed details not visible to the naked eye. Enhancement techniques showed objects with apparent three-dimensional structure that reflected sunlight in ways consistent with metallic surfaces. The objects maintained stable positions relative to the background stars, indicating they were not atmospheric phenomena or debris caught in air currents. What made the Mexico City footage particularly valuable was the sheer volume of documentation from independent sources. Unlike single witness encounters that relied on personal testimony, this event was recorded by dozens of cameras operated by different people in different locations. The convergent evidence created a database of imagery that could be cross-referenced and analysed for consistency. The development of night vision technology also began revealing phenomena that were invisible to the naked eye, but detectable in infrared and other non-visible spectrums. Military personnel and civilian researchers equipped with night vision equipment reported observing objects that appeared to be present but somehow camouflaged from normal vision. These observations suggested that some encounters might represent only a small fraction of the actual activity occurring in our skies. Remote sensing technology deployed by various government agencies also began detecting anomalous aerial activity that couldn't be correlated with known aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Satellite imagery occasionally captured objects that appeared and disappeared without explanation, moving at velocities that exceeded known aircraft capabilities. While much of this data remained classified, occasional leaks provided glimpses of the scope of official monitoring and documentation efforts. The emergence of the internet during this period revolutionized how encounter reports were collected, analyzed, and shared. Databases began accumulating thousands of reports from around the world, allowing researchers to identify patterns and correlations that hadn't been apparent when cases were investigated in isolation. Geographic clustering, temporal patterns, and behavioral characteristics became visible when large numbers of reports were analyzed systematically. Computer analysis of these databases revealed that encounters were not randomly distributed but showed distinct patterns in timing, location, and characteristics. Certain areas experienced repeated activity over extended periods, while some types of encounters showed seasonal variations or correlations with specific atmospheric conditions. These patterns suggested that the phenomena were not random events but followed some underlying logic or purpose. The quality of witness testimony also evolved during this period as more people became familiar with conventional aircraft and atmospheric phenomena through media coverage and education. Witnesses could more readily distinguish between known objects and anomalous phenomena, reducing the number of reports that could be explained as misidentifications. The remaining cases increasingly represented encounters with objects that truly exceeded known technological capabilities. Military and commercial pilots continued to provide some of the most credible testimony about these phenomena. Their professional training in aircraft recognition, navigation, and flight dynamics made them particularly reliable observers of aerial anomalies. When experienced aviators reported encounters with objects that violated basic principles of aerodynamics, their testimony carried significant weight with investigators. The consistency of pilot reports across different countries, airlines, and time periods was remarkable. Regardless of their cultural background or previous beliefs about unexplained phenomena, pilots described encountering objects with similar flight characteristics, electromagnetic effects, and apparent intelligence. This consistency suggested that pilots were observing real phenomena rather than being influenced by cultural expectations or media portrayals. Law enforcement officers also continued contributing significant cases to the documentation of these phenomena. Police officers, trained in observation and reporting, provided detailed accounts of encounters that often included multiple witnesses and corroborating evidence. Their professional credibility and reluctance to report anything that might compromise their careers made their testimony particularly valuable to investigators. The level and type electromagnetic effects continued to be reported throughout this period, with increasing sophistication in the documentation of electrical interference. Video cameras captured the failure of car engines and lights during encounters, while electronic equipment registered specific types of electromagnetic disturbances that correlated with witness observations of unusual objects. This electronic evidence provided objective documentation of effects that had previously relied solely on witness testimony. As the 20th century drew to a close, decades of documentation had established beyond reasonable doubt that unexplained aerial phenomena were real, measurable, and global in scope. The objects demonstrated flight characteristics that exceeded known technology, exhibited apparent intelligence in their behavior, and showed consistent interest in military installations and nuclear facilities. The accumulated evidence painted a picture of phenomena that challenged fundamental assumptions about technology, physics, and possibly intelligence itself. The pattern of official denial and dismissal that had characterized government responses since the 1940s began showing cracks as more military and government personnel came forward with their own encounters. The credibility gap between official explanations and documented evidence became increasingly difficult to maintain as video technology and electronic sensors provided objective documentation of anomalous phenomena. Yet for all the advances in documentation and analysis, the fundamental questions remained unanswered. The object's origins, intentions, and technological basis continued to elude understanding despite decades of investigation. If anything, improved documentation had made the mystery more profound by revealing capabilities that seemed to transcend current scientific understanding. The phenomena appeared to operate according to principles that human science had not yet discovered or acknowledged. The dawn of the 21st century brought with it a technological revolution that would transform how these phenomena were detected, recorded, and analyzed. Digital cameras, cell phones with video capability, and increasingly sophisticated radar systems created an unprecedented opportunity to document encounters with a level of detail that previous generations of investigators could only dream of. Yet paradoxically, this improved documentation capability revealed phenomena that were even more extraordinary and inexplicable than what had been reported in earlier decades. The turn of the millennium also marked a shift in official government attitudes toward these phenomena, though this change occurred gradually and often reluctantly. The wall of secrecy and denial that had characterized official responses since the 1940s began developing cracks as more military personnel, government officials, and credible witnesses came forward with accounts that could no longer be easily dismissed or explained away. One of the most significant developments of this period was the emergence of what researchers began calling the tic-tac encounters, named after the distinctive shape described by military witnesses who observed these objects during training exercises off the coast of California. In November of 2004, the crew of the USS Princeton, a guided missile cruiser equipped with the most advanced radar systems in the Navy's fleet, began tracking objects that appeared on their screens displaying flight characteristics that defied conventional understanding. Commander David Fravor, a veteran Navy pilot with over 18 years of flight experience and commander of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, was conducting routine training exercises from the USS Nimitz when he was redirected to investigate radar contacts that had been puzzling the Princeton's crew for several days. The radar operators had been tracking objects that would appear at altitudes above 80,000 feet, then drop to just above sea level in a matter of seconds, a maneuver that would subject any conventional aircraft to G-forces that would tear it apart. When Commander Fravor and his wingman Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich arrived at the intercept coordinates, they observed something that would fundamentally challenge their understanding of technology and physics. Approximately 40 feet below the surface of the ocean, they could see a disturbance in the water, described as though something large was just beneath the surface, creating turbulence and foam in perfectly calm seas. Above this underwater disturbance hovered an object that Commander Fravor described as roughly 40 feet in length, white in colour and shaped like a tic-tac breath mint with no visible wings, engines or control surfaces. The object moved with complete smoothness, rotating and manoeuvring in ways that seemed to ignore the basic principles of aerodynamics. When Commander Fravor began a descent to get a closer look, the object appeared to react to his movement, ascending to meet his aircraft. What happened next defied everything Commander Fravor understood about aircraft performance. As he maneuvered his F-18 Super Hornet in a descending spiral to intercept the object, it suddenly accelerated and disappeared, reappearing instantaneously at his assigned rendezvous point 60 miles away. The object had somehow anticipated where he was supposed to go next and arrived there before he did, despite having no apparent access to his flight plan or radio communications. The encounter lasted several minutes and was observed by multiple trained military personnel. Lieutenant Commander Dietrich corroborated Commander Fravor's account, describing the same object exhibiting the same impossible flight characteristics. When they returned to the Nimitz, radar operators confirmed that they had tracked the object's instantaneous movement to the rendezvous point, providing electronic confirmation of the impossible acceleration the pilots had witnessed. Later that same day, another crew was launched to investigate continued radar contacts in the area. Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood successfully recorded video of one of these objects using his aircraft's targeting system, creating footage that would later be released to the public and analysed by experts around the world. The video showed an object moving over the ocean with no visible means of propulsion, rotating and manoeuvring in ways that conventional aircraft could not duplicate. The tic-tac encounters were significant not only because of the credibility of the witnesses involved, but also because they were documented by multiple independent systems simultaneously. Visual observations by trained pilots were corroborated by radar tracking from surface ships, infrared video from aircraft targeting systems, and sonar contacts that suggested underwater activity. This convergence of evidence from different sensing methods created a comprehensive documentation of phenomena that exceeded known technological capabilities. What made these encounters particularly puzzling was the object's apparent understanding of human military operations and technology. The objects seemed to know details about the training exercises that should have been classified information, anticipating aircraft movements and appearing at predetermined coordinates that were not publicly available. This suggested not only advanced technology but also sophisticated intelligence gathering capabilities. The underwater disturbances observed during the tic-tac encounters also raised new questions about the scope of these phenomena. Previous encounters had focused primarily on aerial objects, but the turbulence patterns observed beneath the surface suggested that whatever intelligence was behind these phenomena might be equally comfortable operating in oceanic environments. The implications for undetected activity in the world's oceans were staggering. Around the same time period, similar encounters were being reported by military personnel in other parts of the world. British Royal Air Force pilots reported intercepting objects with identical flight characteristics over the North Sea, while Royal Navy ships tracked radar contacts that exhibited the same impossible acceleration and maneuvering capabilities observed by American forces. The global consistency of these reports suggested that whatever was being observed represented a widespread phenomenon rather than isolated incidents. The technological sophistication of these objects appeared to be advancing along with human detection capabilities, as though the phenomena were adapting to stay ahead of our ability to track and analyze them. Earlier encounters had involved objects that, while extraordinary, at least operated within the visible spectrum and could be tracked by conventional radar. The new generation of encounters involved objects that seemed capable of masking their presence from multiple types of sensors simultaneously. Stealth technology, while impressive by human standards, typically involves compromises that make aircraft invisible to certain types of detection while remaining vulnerable to others. The objects being encountered seemed to possess comprehensive stealth capabilities that could fool radar, infrared sensors, and even visual observation when desired, yet could also become fully visible and trackable when they apparently chose to do so. This selective visibility suggested a level of technological control that exceeded anything in human arsenals. The objects could apparently modulate their electromagnetic signatures at will, appearing and disappearing from radar screens without any change in their physical behavior observable to witnesses. They seemed to operate according to principles that human science had not yet discovered or developed. The energy requirements for the flight characteristics observed in these encounters also challenged conventional understanding of propulsion systems. Objects that could accelerate from stationary positions to thousands of miles per hour instantaneously would require energy sources of extraordinary power and efficiency. No known propulsion technology could provide the power-to-weight ratios necessary for such performance, yet these objects achieved these capabilities while apparently operating in complete silence. The absence of sonic booms from objects moving at tremendous velocities suggested propulsion methods that somehow avoided the compression wave effects that create sound barriers for conventional aircraft. This implied either technology that could manipulate the surrounding atmosphere or propulsion principles that operated outside the normal interaction between objects and air molecules. Military encounters during this period also revealed new aspects of the electromagnetic effects that had been reported since the earliest documented cases. Electronic warfare systems designed to jam enemy communications and radar found themselves being jammed by unknown sources during encounters with these objects. The sophistication of the electronic countermeasures suggested technology that could analyze and defeat military electronic systems in real time. Fighter pilots reported that their weapon systems would malfunction or shut down entirely during close encounters with these objects, rendering their aircraft defensively helpless. The precision of these electronic attacks suggested detailed knowledge of military aircraft systems and the ability to selectively disable specific components without affecting others. This level of electronic warfare capability represented technology far advanced beyond current human systems. The psychological impact of these encounters on military personnel was profound and often career-altering. Pilots and radar operators who had dedicated their lives to understanding and operating advanced military technology found themselves confronted with objects that made their most sophisticated equipment seem primitive by comparison. The encounters challenged not only their understanding of technology, but their role as defenders of national airspace. Many military witnesses reported feelings of helplessness during encounters with objects that could outmaneuver their aircraft with ease and disable their weapons systems at will. The realization that conventional military forces had no effective response to these phenomena raised disturbing questions about national security and the adequacy of current defense capabilities. The consistency of military encounters across different branches of service and different countries suggested coordination or common origin for the phenomena being observed. Navy, Air Force, Army, and Marine personnel reported encounters with objects exhibiting identical flight characteristics and electronic warfare capabilities. This consistency implied either a single source for all encounters or multiple sources using identical technology. Intelligence agencies began taking these military encounters more seriously as the scope and sophistication of the phenomena became undeniable. The objects demonstrated capabilities that would represent revolutionary advances in aerospace technology, materials science, and energy systems. If foreign adversaries possessed such technology, the strategic implications would be unprecedented. If the technology originated from non-human sources, the implications would be even more profound. The emergence of commercial satellite imagery and civilian radar systems also began providing independent confirmation of anomalous aerial activity. Objects displaying extraordinary flight characteristics were being detected by multiple independent systems, creating a database of encounters that could not be attributed to equipment malfunction or operator error. Private aerospace companies developing advanced aircraft found their most ambitious prototypes far exceeded by the capabilities demonstrated in these encounters. Objects that could hover silently, accelerate to tremendous speeds instantaneously, and maneuver without regard for aerodynamic limitations represented technology that was decades or centuries ahead of current human capabilities. The Internet age also enabled rapid sharing of encounter reports and analysis among researchers worldwide. Databases accumulated thousands of reports from credible witnesses, allowing for sophisticated pattern analysis that revealed correlations and trends invisible in isolated cases. The global nature of these phenomena became undeniable as reports flowed in from every continent and culture. Computer modeling of the flight characteristics reported in military encounters revealed energy requirements that challenged current understanding of physics and engineering. The power sources necessary to achieve the observed acceleration and maneuvering would require revolutionary breakthroughs in energy generation and storage. Yet these objects achieved such performance while maintaining complete silence and leaving no visible exhaust or propulsion signatures. Materials science experts analyzing the durability requirements for objects performing such extreme maneuvers concluded that the structural materials would need properties far exceeding any known substances. The G-forces generated by instantaneous acceleration and sharp direction changes would destroy any conventional aircraft, yet witnesses reported objects that seemed unaffected by forces that would be catastrophic to human-engineered vehicles. As the first decade of the 21st century progressed, the accumulated evidence for extraordinary aerial phenomena became increasingly difficult to ignore or explain through conventional means. Military encounters documented by multiple independent systems, combined with civilian reports from credible witnesses worldwide, painted a picture of phenomena that operated according to principles beyond current scientific understanding. The objects demonstrated consistent characteristics across decades of encounters, suggesting stable technology rather than experimental or developmental systems. Their apparent interest in military installations and nuclear facilities implied intelligence and purpose rather than random natural phenomena. Most significantly, their capabilities continued to exceed human technology by margins that seemed to be increasing rather than decreasing as human aerospace technology advanced. The stage was set for revelations that would fundamentally change how governments, military organizations, and the scientific community approach these phenomena. The wall of secrecy and denial that had characterized official responses for over 60 years was about to crumble under the weight of evidence that could no longer be contained or explained away. The revelations that would shake the foundations of official secrecy began emerging in earnest during the second decade of the 21st century as a confluence of technological advancement, government transparency initiatives, and courageous whistleblowers finally breached the wall of denial that had stood for over 7 decades. What had been whispered about in classified briefings and hidden in secure facilities was about to be thrust into the harsh light of public scrutiny, forever changing the conversation about what shares our skies. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. In December of 2017, the New York Times published a bombshell article revealing the existence of a secret Pentagon program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, known by its acronym AATIP. The program, which had operated from 2007 to 2012 with a budget of $22 million, was tasked with investigating reports of unidentified aerial phenomena encountered by military personnel. The revelation of ATIP's existence was extraordinary, not because the military was investigating these encounters, but because the program's very existence had been kept secret from Congress and the American public for over a decade. The program had been initiated at the request of then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who had become convinced through briefings and evidence that these phenomena represented either advanced foreign technology or something even more extraordinary. Luis Elizondo, who had served as the program's director, made the decision to resign from his Pentagon position and go public with information about the program's findings. In interviews following the Times article, Elizondo revealed that AATIP had documented numerous encounters between military personnel and objects that exhibited flight characteristics far beyond any known human technology. The program had collected video evidence, radar data, and witness testimony that painted a picture of phenomena that challenged conventional understanding of physics and aerospace engineering. The timing of these revelations was particularly significant because they coincided with the Pentagon's release of 3 videos that had been recorded by military personnel during encounters with unexplained objects. The videos, which quickly became known as the FLIR 1, gimbal, and go fast footage, showed objects exhibiting flight characteristics that defied conventional aircraft capabilities. The footage had been leaked previously, but never officially acknowledged by the Pentagon until this moment. The FLIR 1 video, recorded by Navy pilots in 2004, showed an object moving over the ocean at high speed with no visible means of propulsion. The pilot's commentary, captured on the audio track, revealed their amazement at what they were observing. "Look at that thing, dude!" one pilot exclaimed as they watched an object that appeared to be rotating while maintaining its flight path. "It's rotating!" The professional composure in their voices gradually gave way to wonder and confusion as they realized they were observing something beyond their understanding. The gimbal video, captured in 2015, showed an object that appeared to rotate completely around its axis while maintaining its forward motion, a maneuver that would be impossible for any conventional aircraft. The object maintained a steady flight path despite its rotation, suggesting propulsion and control systems that operated independently of the craft's orientation. Pilots observing the object noted that it was moving against strong, high-altitude winds that should have affected any conventional aircraft. The Go Fast video depicted an object skimming just above the ocean surface at tremendous speed, with pilots tracking it using their aircraft's targeting systems. The speed calculations derived from the video data showed the object moving far faster than any known aircraft could achieve at such low altitude. The object maintained its course and speed without any visible course corrections or control inputs, suggesting automated flight systems of extraordinary sophistication. These videos represented only a small fraction of the encounters documented by AATIP, according to Elizondo and other program officials who began speaking publicly. The program had accumulated hundreds of reports from military personnel describing encounters with objects that consistently exceeded known technological capabilities. The encounters shared common characteristics across different military branches, geographic regions, and time periods, suggesting a coherent phenomenon rather than random anomalies. The Pentagon's acknowledgement of these videos marked a watershed moment in the official treatment of unexplained aerial phenomena. For the first time since the closure of Project Blue Book in 1969, a government agency was publicly admitting that it had documented objects whose capabilities exceeded current understanding. The implications were staggering, regardless of whether these objects represented foreign technology, natural phenomena, or something else entirely. Commander David Fravor, the Navy pilot who had encountered the Tic Tac object in 2004, came forward to provide detailed testimony about his experience. Speaking on national television and before congressional committees, Fravor described his encounter with an object that violated every principle of aerodynamics and propulsion that he understood. His credibility as a decorated military officer with impeccable service record lent enormous weight to his testimony. Fravor's willingness to speak publicly encouraged other military personnel to come forward with their own encounters. Pilots, radar operators, and intelligence personnel began sharing accounts that had been classified or suppressed for years. The consistency of their reports across different time periods and military installations painted a picture of phenomena that had been systematically documented but hidden from public view. The revelations also exposed the inadequacy of official explanations that had been offered for decades. Weather balloons, experimental aircraft, and atmospheric phenomena could not account for objects that demonstrated trans-medium capabilities, moving seamlessly between air and water environments. Swamp gas and temperature inversions could not explain radar contacts that showed solid objects performing impossible maneuvers at tremendous speeds. The scientific community began to take notice as credible military witnesses provided detailed technical descriptions of encounters with objects that challenged fundamental assumptions about physics and engineering. The objects demonstrated capabilities that would require revolutionary breakthroughs in multiple scientific disciplines, including propulsion, materials science, and energy systems. Dr. Hal Puthoff, a physicist who had worked with AATIP, revealed that the program had investigated the theoretical physics implications of the observed phenomena. The objects appeared to manipulate gravitational fields, electromagnetic radiation, and possibly space-time itself in ways that human science could barely conceptualize, let alone replicate. The technology implied understanding of physical principles that were at the cutting edge of theoretical physics and beyond current practical application. The energy requirements for the observed flight characteristics posed particular challenges to conventional understanding. Objects that could accelerate from rest to thousands of miles per hour instantaneously would require energy sources of extraordinary power density. The absence of visible exhaust, heat signatures, or other energy waste products suggested propulsion systems with efficiency levels far exceeding any human technology. Materials analysis of the few physical samples allegedly recovered from these phenomena revealed isotopic ratios and molecular structures that did not match known terrestrial materials. While the authenticity of these samples remained disputed, their unusual properties suggested manufacturing processes or natural formation mechanisms unknown to current science. The materials exhibited properties that would be valuable for advanced aerospace applications if they could be understood and replicated. The Pentagon's admission that it had been studying these phenomena also revealed the existence of a bureaucratic infrastructure dedicated to tracking and analyzing unexplained encounters. Multiple government agencies, including the CIA, NSA, and various military intelligence organizations, had been collecting reports and data about these objects for decades. The scope of official interest suggested that the phenomena were being taken seriously at the highest levels of government, even while public statements minimized their significance. Congressional interest in these revelations grew as lawmakers realized that significant government resources had been devoted to studying phenomena that had never been officially acknowledged. Senators and representatives began demanding briefings and official reports about what government agencies knew and when they knew it. The lack of congressional oversight of programs investigating potentially revolutionary technology raised questions about governmental transparency and accountability. The international implications of these revelations were equally significant. If the objects represented foreign technology, they indicated that potential adversaries had achieved breakthrough capabilities that rendered conventional military forces obsolete. If they represented something else, the implications for human understanding of our place in the universe were profound. Either scenario demanded serious scientific and political attention. Military personnel who had remained silent for decades about their encounters began speaking publicly, encouraged by the changing official attitude. Retired officers revealed encounters at nuclear weapons facilities where unknown objects had demonstrated the ability to interfere with critical defense systems. The implications for national security were staggering, as these incidents suggested that conventional defenses were inadequate against the observed phenomena. The revelation that these objects had shown particular interest in nuclear facilities raised disturbing questions about their intentions and capabilities. Encounters at missile silos, weapons storage facilities, and nuclear power plants suggested either sophisticated intelligence gathering or some other purpose related to humanity's most destructive technologies. The consistency of this pattern across multiple facilities and decades indicated systematic rather than random behavior. Commercial pilots, emboldened by military personnel speaking publicly about their encounters, began sharing their own experiences with objects that had paced their aircraft or exhibited impossible flight characteristics. Airlines that had previously discouraged pilots from reporting such encounters began taking them more seriously, realizing that these phenomena might pose safety concerns for civilian aviation. Air traffic controllers contributed their own accounts of tracking objects that appeared on radar screens but behaved unlike any known aircraft. The objects would appear and disappear without explanation, move at impossible speeds, or remain stationary at altitudes where no aircraft could hover. The consistency of these reports across different airports and control facilities suggested widespread phenomena that had been systematically overlooked or explained away. The emergence of high-resolution satellite imagery and advanced radar systems had also begun providing independent confirmation of anomalous aerial activity. Objects displaying extraordinary flight characteristics were being detected by multiple independent systems, creating databases of encounters that could not be attributed to equipment malfunction or operator error. The convergence of evidence from different detection methods strengthened the case for phenomena that exceeded current technological understanding. Private aerospace companies and defense contractors found themselves confronted with documentation of capabilities that far exceeded their most advanced research projects. Objects that could hover silently, accelerate instantaneously, and maneuver without apparent regard for aerodynamic limitations represented technology that was potentially decades or centuries ahead of current human achievements. The implications for competitive advantage and national security were enormous. The academic scientific community began grappling with evidence that challenged fundamental assumptions about what was possible in aerospace technology. Peer-reviewed journals started publishing papers analyzing the physics implications of the observed phenomena, marking the first time in decades that mainstream science was taking these reports seriously. The data demanded theoretical frameworks that could explain capabilities that seemed to violate known physical laws. As more information emerged about the scope and sophistication of these phenomena, it became clear that the revelations of 2017 were only the beginning. Government agencies possessed vastly more data about these encounters than had been released, and pressure mounted for greater transparency about what was known and what was being investigated. The era of official denial was ending, but the era of understanding had barely begun. The implications of these revelations extended far beyond questions of technology and national security. If objects exhibiting such capabilities were regularly operating in human airspace, the assumptions underlying our understanding of our place in the universe might require fundamental revision. The phenomena suggested intelligence and technology that operated according to principles unknown to human science, raising questions that challenged the foundations of our worldview. The momentum generated by the Pentagon's admissions and the courage of military witnesses speaking publicly created an unstoppable wave of disclosure that would fundamentally transform how these phenomena were studied, discussed, and understood by both government institutions and the scientific community. What had been relegated to the margins of serious inquiry for over 7 decades was suddenly thrust into the mainstream of national security discussions, congressional hearings, and academic research. In June of 2021, the Pentagon released an official report to Congress titled Preliminary Assessment Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, marking the first time since Project Blue Book that the US government had issued a comprehensive official statement acknowledging the reality of encounters with objects displaying extraordinary capabilities. The report documented 144 instances of unexplained aerial phenomena observed by military personnel between 2004 and 2005-2021, with all but one remaining unexplained despite extensive investigation. The report's language was carefully measured, but its implications were revolutionary. For the first time, official government documentation acknowledged that military personnel had encountered objects that appeared to remain stationary in winds aloft, move against the wind, maneuver abruptly, or move at considerable speed without discernible means of propulsion. The report further stated that some objects demonstrated unusual flight characteristics, and that the phenomena clearly pose a safety of flight issue and may pose a challenge to US national security. The single case that investigators claimed to have resolved was identified as a deflating balloon, highlighting the thoroughness of the investigation process and the credibility of the remaining unexplained encounters. The fact that trained investigators using advanced analytical techniques could resolve only 1 out of 144 cases demonstrated the genuinely anomalous nature of what military personnel were observing. The report also revealed that the phenomena were not limited to visual observations, but had been detected by multiple sensor systems simultaneously. Radar operators had tracked objects exhibiting the same impossible flight characteristics described by pilots, while infrared sensors had captured thermal signatures that defied conventional explanation. The convergence of evidence from different detection methods eliminated the possibility that the encounters represented sensor malfunctions or optical illusions. Perhaps most significantly, the report acknowledged that some encounters had involved objects that demonstrated advanced technology and recommended increased funding and resources for investigation. This represented a complete reversal of the official policy of dismissal and denial that had characterized government responses since the 1940s. The phenomena were now officially recognized as real, measurable, and potentially significant for national security. The congressional response to the Pentagon report was swift and bipartisan. Lawmakers from both political parties expressed concern about the implications of objects with unknown origins and advanced capabilities operating freely in American airspace. Senate Intelligence Committee Vice Chairman Marco Rubio stated that, "We have things flying over our military bases and places where we are conducting military exercises and we don't know what it is, and it isn't ours." The bipartisan nature of congressional concern demonstrated that these phenomena transcended political boundaries. Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee, who served on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, became one of the most vocal advocates for greater transparency about these encounters. He argued that the American people deserved to know what their government had learned about objects that could potentially pose safety and security risks. His efforts helped build momentum for regular congressional briefings and public hearings about these phenomena. The establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as AARO, in July of 2022 marked another milestone in the official treatment of these phenomena. Located within the Pentagon and reporting directly to senior military leadership, AARO was tasked with detecting, identifying, and attributing objects of interest in air, maritime, and space domains. The office represented the most comprehensive government effort to investigate these phenomena since the closure of Project Blue Book. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, appointed as AARO's first director, brought impressive scientific credentials to the position. With a background in physics and extensive experience in intelligence and defense research, Dr. Kirkpatrick approached the investigation of these phenomena with scientific rigor while acknowledging their potential significance for national security. His appointment signaled that the government was finally treating these encounters with the seriousness they deserved. AARO's establishment came with significant resources and broad investigative authority. The office was authorized to coordinate with intelligence agencies, military services, and other government departments to collect and analyze data about unexplained encounters. This represented a fundamental shift from previous ad hoc approaches to a systematic, well-funded investigation with access to the most advanced analytical tools available to the US government. The office also began implementing standardized reporting procedures for military personnel who encountered unexplained phenomena. Rather than discouraging reports or treating witnesses as unreliable, the new procedures emphasized the importance of documenting encounters thoroughly and reporting them through proper channels. This policy change encouraged more military personnel to come forward with their experiences, significantly expanding the database of documented encounters. One of AARO's first major revelations concerned the scope of encounter reports. Dr. Kirkpatrick testified to Congress that the office was receiving hundreds of new reports from military personnel who had previously been reluctant to document their experiences. Many of these reports described encounters that had occurred years or even decades earlier, but had never been officially reported due to career concerns or lack of proper reporting channels. The quality of these reports was generally very high, according to AARO officials. Military witnesses provided detailed technical descriptions of what they had observed, including precise timing, location data, weather conditions, and equipment readings. The professional training of military observers made them particularly reliable witnesses to aerial phenomena, as they possessed the technical knowledge to distinguish between known aircraft and genuinely anomalous objects. AARO also began analysing historical cases that had been documented by previous investigation programs but never fully resolved. The office applied modern analytical techniques to decades-old encounter reports, sometimes revealing new insights that had been missed by earlier investigators. Computer modeling and advanced image analysis provided new tools for understanding the flight characteristics and technological implications of reported phenomena. The international dimension of these phenomena also received increased attention as AARO began coordinating with allied governments that were conducting their own investigations. The United Kingdom, France, Canada, and other nations had been quietly documenting similar encounters for decades, and the sharing of information revealed that the phenomena were genuinely global in scope. Objects exhibiting identical flight characteristics were being observed by military personnel around the world. The French government's GEIPAN program, which had been investigating unexplained aerial phenomena since 1977, provided particularly valuable data for comparative analysis. French researchers had documented hundreds of encounters with objects displaying the same impossible flight characteristics reported by American military personnel. The consistency of reports across different countries and cultures suggested that witnesses were observing real phenomena rather than being influenced by cultural expectations. The Vatican's acknowledgement of these phenomena added another dimension to the discussion. In 2021, the Vatican Observatory's director stated that the Catholic Church would be open to the possibility that some unexplained encounters might represent non-human intelligence. This statement from one of the world's oldest and most conservative institutions reflected the growing mainstream acceptance that these phenomena deserved serious consideration. Academic institutions also began developing research programs focused on unexplained aerial phenomena. Harvard University's Galileo project, led by astronomer Dr. Avi Loeb, established a systematic approach to detecting and analyzing objects exhibiting anomalous flight characteristics. The project deployed advanced sensor networks capable of tracking objects across multiple wavelengths and detection methods, providing the kind of comprehensive monitoring that had been lacking in previous investigations. Dr. Loeb's involvement brought significant academic credibility to the field. As a respected theoretical physicist and cosmologist, his willingness to investigate these phenomena encouraged other scientists to take the subject seriously. His approach emphasized the application of rigorous scientific methods to phenomena that had previously been relegated to fringe research. The Galileo project's preliminary findings suggested that anomalous objects were being detected with surprising frequency. Advanced sensor systems were identifying objects that exhibited flight characteristics inconsistent with known technology or natural phenomena. While most detections required further analysis to determine their nature, the data suggested that unexplained aerial activity was more common than previously understood. Private research organizations also contributed significant resources to investigating these phenomena. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies brought together scientists, engineers, and researchers from various disciplines to analyze encounter data and develop theoretical frameworks for understanding the observed capabilities. Their interdisciplinary approach recognized that explaining these phenomena would require breakthroughs in multiple scientific fields simultaneously. The emergence of artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies provided new tools for analyzing large databases of encounter reports. AI systems could identify patterns and correlations in thousands of reports that would be invisible to human analysts. These computational approaches revealed geographic clustering, temporal patterns, and behavioral characteristics that suggested underlying logic or purpose to the phenomena. Machine learning analysis of military encounter data revealed that the objects showed consistent flight characteristics across decades of observations. The same impossible acceleration rates, angular turns, and trans-medium capabilities appeared in reports from the 1940s through the present day. This consistency suggested stable technology rather than experimental or developmental systems that would be expected to show evolution over time. The psychological impact of these official revelations on military personnel who had remained silent about their encounters for decades was profound. Many veterans came forward to describe encounters they had kept secret throughout their careers, relieved that they could finally speak openly about experiences that had troubled them for years. Their accounts often revealed encounters far more dramatic than what had been officially acknowledged. Retired Air Force Colonel Charles Holt, who had investigated the Rendlesham Forest incident decades earlier, expressed satisfaction that the phenomena he had documented were finally receiving serious official attention. His detailed records and audio recordings of the encounter provided valuable data for modern analysis, and his willingness to speak publicly had encouraged other military witnesses to come forward with their own experiences. The shift in official attitudes also influenced how active duty military personnel approached encounters with unexplained phenomena. Rather than avoiding reports that might damage their careers, service members were encouraged to document their experiences thoroughly. This policy change led to a dramatic increase in the number of reports being filed, suggesting that many encounters had gone unreported in previous years due to career concerns. The quality of documentation also improved significantly as military personnel realized their reports would be taken seriously and investigated professionally. Witnesses began using all available recording equipment to capture evidence during encounters, while radar operators and other technical personnel preserved electronic data that might provide insights into the object's capabilities and origins. The technological implications of these phenomena continued to challenge conventional understanding of physics and engineering. Objects that could accelerate from stationary positions to hypersonic speeds without producing sonic booms suggested propulsion principles that operated outside known aerodynamic constraints. The absence of visible exhaust or heat signatures implied energy conversion processes of unprecedented efficiency. Materials scientists analyzing the structural requirements for objects performing such extreme maneuvers concluded that the construction materials would need properties far exceeding any known substances. The G-forces generated by instantaneous acceleration and sharp directional changes would destroy conventional aircraft, yet witnesses consistently reported objects that seemed unaffected by forces that would be catastrophic to human-engineered vehicles. The electromagnetic effects reported in many encounters also suggested technology that could manipulate electrical systems across significant distances. Military equipment designed to resist electronic warfare attacks was being disabled or disrupted by unknown sources during encounters with these objects. The precision and effectiveness of these electronic countermeasures indicated understanding of military systems that exceeded the capabilities of known adversaries. As the scope and sophistication of these phenomena became increasingly apparent through official investigations and academic research, the questions being asked evolved from whether they existed to what they represented and where they originated. The evidence for their reality was no longer disputable, but their nature and implications remained profoundly mysterious. The evidence that had been accumulating for decades now demanded a fundamental re-evaluation of humanity's understanding of what was possible in our skies and what intelligence might share our world. As government investigations expanded and academic research intensified, the patterns emerging from thousands of documented encounters began painting a picture of phenomena that operated according to principles that challenged the very foundations of modern physics and aerospace engineering. The consistency of reported flight characteristics across different decades, geographic regions, and cultural contexts was perhaps the most striking aspect of the accumulated data. Whether observed by American fighter pilots over the Pacific, British Royal Air Force personnel over the North Sea, or civilian witnesses across every continent, the objects displayed remarkably similar capabilities. They accelerated without apparent reaction mass, changed direction without deceleration, and moved between different mediums, air, water, and possibly space with equal facility. Dr. Kevin Knuth, a former NASA scientist who began analyzing encounter data through the lens of advanced physics, published research suggesting that the observed flight characteristics required manipulation of space-time itself. The objects appeared to create localized distortions in the fabric of reality that allowed them to move without interacting with surrounding matter in conventional ways. This would explain their ability to accelerate instantaneously without producing sonic booms or visible exhaust signatures. The energy requirements for such space-time manipulation would be enormous by current human standards, yet the object seemed to operate with complete efficiency, showing no waste heat or energy signatures detectable by infrared sensors. This suggested either energy sources of unprecedented power density or fundamental understanding of physics that allowed for near-perfect energy conversion. Either possibility implied technology that was centuries or millennia ahead of current human capabilities. The materials science implications were equally staggering. Objects performing the extreme maneuvers documented by military witnesses would need to be constructed from substances that could withstand forces that would vaporize any known material. The structural integrity required for instantaneous acceleration to hypersonic speeds suggested either revolutionary manufacturing techniques or materials with properties that had never been observed in terrestrial substances. Analysis of the few alleged physical samples from these encounters revealed isotopic ratios that did not match known terrestrial patterns. While the authenticity of these materials remained disputed, their unusual properties included strength-to-weight ratios that exceeded theoretical limits for known substances, and crystalline structures that appeared to have been formed under conditions not found naturally on Earth. The electromagnetic signatures detected during encounters also suggested technology that operated on principles beyond current human understanding. Rather than using electromagnetic radiation for propulsion or communication in ways familiar to human science, these objects seemed to manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that could influence matter and energy across significant distances without detectable power sources or transmission methods. Military electronic warfare specialists who had studied the jamming and interference effects reported during encounters concluded that the objects possessed electronic warfare capabilities that far exceeded those of any known human technology. The precision with which specific systems could be targeted and disabled while leaving other equipment unaffected suggested real-time analysis and response capabilities that implied artificial intelligence of extraordinary sophistication. The behavioral patterns exhibited by these objects during encounters with human aircraft and installations also suggested intelligence that was both advanced and purposeful. Rather than following predictable flight paths or responding to human actions in ways that could be anticipated, the objects seemed to demonstrate awareness of human intentions and capabilities that bordered on prescience. Commander David Fravor's account of the Tic Tac object anticipating his planned rendezvous point and arriving there before he did exemplified this apparently predictive behavior. The object somehow knew details about his mission that should have been accessible only through classified military communications, yet it demonstrated this knowledge through its actions rather than any detectable interception of radio transmissions. Similar patterns of apparently prescient behavior appeared in encounter reports dating back to the earliest documented cases. Objects would position themselves along aircraft flight paths before the aircraft arrived, or appear at locations where military exercises were scheduled to occur, sometimes before the personnel involved had been briefed on their destinations. This suggested either extraordinary intelligence gathering capabilities or awareness that transcended conventional information transfer methods. The object's apparent interest in nuclear weapons and facilities represented another consistent behavioral pattern that raised profound questions about their intentions and origins. From the early encounters at Los Alamos and atomic testing sites in the 1940s through the modern incidents at missile silos and nuclear power plants, these phenomena showed persistent interest in humanity's most destructive technologies. Former missile launch officers who had remained silent for decades began speaking publicly about incidents where nuclear weapons systems had been disabled during encounters with unexplained objects. Captain Robert Salas, Lieutenant Colonel Dwin Arneson, and other credible military witnesses described events where entire squadrons of nuclear missiles had gone offline simultaneously during encounters with objects displaying the characteristic flight patterns documented in other cases. The precision and scope of these electronic intrusions suggested detailed knowledge of nuclear weapons systems and the ability to interfere with them remotely without causing permanent damage. The missiles would malfunction during the encounters but return to normal operation after the objects departed, indicating sophisticated understanding of both the system's vulnerabilities and their importance to human security. These nuclear facility encounters were particularly disturbing to national security analysts because they demonstrated that whatever intelligence was behind these phenomena possessed both the capability and the interest to interfere with humanity's ultimate weapons. The consistency of this pattern across different facilities and time periods suggested systematic monitoring rather than random occurrence. The global nature of these phenomena also became increasingly apparent as international cooperation in investigation expanded. The same types of objects exhibiting identical flight characteristics were being observed by military personnel in countries around the world. NATO allies shared classified encounter reports that revealed remarkable consistency in the descriptions of objects that seemed to operate with impunity in the airspace of multiple nations. The French Cometa report, released by a group of high-ranking military and intelligence officials, concluded that the most compelling encounters involved objects of non-human origin. The report analysed decades of French military encounters and concluded that the flight characteristics and technological capabilities exceeded anything in human arsenals by such significant margins that terrestrial origin was unlikely. Similar conclusions were being reached by investigation teams in other countries. The British Ministry of Defence's classified studies had documented encounters that defied conventional explanation, while Canadian government researchers had analysed cases that showed the same impossible flight characteristics reported by American military personnel. The international consistency of these encounters suggested phenomena that operated on a global scale. The Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences began hosting conferences on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, with prominent astronomers acknowledging that some unexplained encounters might represent evidence of non-human technology. This marked a significant shift in the position of mainstream scientific institutions, which had previously avoided the subject entirely. Dr. Avi Loeb's Galileo project began detecting objects in Earth's atmosphere that exhibited flight characteristics inconsistent with known natural phenomena or human technology. Using advanced sensor networks capable of tracking objects across multiple wavelengths simultaneously, the project documented encounters that corroborated military reports of objects with extraordinary capabilities. The project's preliminary data suggested that anomalous objects were detected with surprising frequency when sophisticated monitoring systems were deployed. This implied that the phenomena were more common than generally realized, with most encounters going undetected due to limitations in current monitoring capabilities, rather than rarity of the phenomena themselves. Artificial intelligence analysis of decades of encounter reports revealed patterns that human investigators had missed. Machine learning algorithms identified correlations between encounter timing and various environmental factors, suggesting that the objects operated according to patterns that could be statistically analyzed even if their underlying logic remained mysterious. The AI analysis also revealed that encounter reports had remained remarkably consistent in their descriptions of object capabilities across decades of observations. This consistency contradicted the hypothesis that the reports represented misidentifications of evolving human technology, as such technology would be expected to show development and change over time rather than stable characteristics. Civilian research organizations began deploying their own monitoring systems to supplement government investigations. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies established sensor networks that could detect and track objects exhibiting anomalous flight characteristics, while university research programs developed new theoretical frameworks for understanding the physics implications of the observed phenomena. The emergence of high-resolution commercial satellite imagery also began providing independent confirmation of anomalous aerial activity. Objects displaying extraordinary flight characteristics were being captured by satellite cameras, creating visual documentation that could be analysed frame by frame to understand their movement patterns and physical characteristics. Private aerospace companies found themselves confronting documentation of capabilities that exceeded their most ambitious research projects by enormous margins. Companies developing hypersonic aircraft, advanced propulsion systems, and stealth technology realized that the documented encounters involved objects that had already achieved performance levels that represented decades or centuries of advancement beyond current human capabilities. The implications for competitive advantage and technological development were staggering. If these objects represented foreign technology, they indicated that potential adversaries had achieved breakthrough capabilities that rendered current military systems obsolete. If they represented something else, the implications for human understanding of science and technology were even more profound. The psychological and sociological impacts of these revelations began manifesting as the reality of the phenomena became undeniable. Military personnel who had built their careers around understanding and operating the most advanced human technology found themselves confronted with objects that made their sophisticated equipment seem primitive. This had profound effects on their worldview and sense of humanity's technological prowess. Civilian populations also began grappling with the implications of sharing their world with intelligence that possessed capabilities far exceeding human achievement. The revelation that objects of unknown origin had been operating freely in human airspace for decades challenged fundamental assumptions about human dominance and technological advancement. Religious leaders began addressing the theological implications of potential non-human intelligence visiting Earth. The Vatican issued statements suggesting that the existence of intelligent life elsewhere in the universe would not contradict Catholic doctrine, while other religious organizations grappled with how such revelations might affect their understanding of humanity's place in creation. The scientific establishment faced perhaps the greatest challenge in integrating these phenomena into existing theoretical frameworks. The observed capabilities seemed to violate fundamental principles of physics as currently understood, requiring either revolutionary advances in scientific knowledge or acknowledgement that current understanding was incomplete in fundamental ways. As the scope and implications of these phenomena became increasingly apparent, the questions being asked evolved from whether they existed to what they meant for humanity's future. The evidence for their reality was overwhelming, but their nature, origins, and intentions remained profound mysteries that would require unprecedented cooperation between governments, scientists, and institutions to unravel. The next phase of investigation would need to move beyond documentation and toward understanding, requiring theoretical frameworks that could explain capabilities that seem to transcend current scientific knowledge, while preparing for implications that might fundamentally change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The convergence of evidence from military encounters, government investigations, and academic research had reached a critical threshold where denial was no longer tenable, yet understanding remained tantalizingly elusive. As we moved deeper into the 2020s, the focus shifted from proving that these phenomena existed to grappling with what their existence meant for humanity's conception of itself, its technology, and its place in a universe that suddenly seemed far less empty than previously imagined. The establishment of regular congressional hearings on unexplained aerial phenomena marked a watershed moment in American political discourse. For the first time since the 1950s, elected officials were publicly acknowledging that objects of unknown origin were regularly penetrating the most restricted airspace in the world, demonstrating capabilities that exceeded known human technology by extraordinary margins. The bipartisan nature of congressional concern reflected the reality that these phenomena transcended traditional political boundaries and demanded serious attention regardless of partisan affiliation. During a particularly revealing hearing in May of 2022, Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence Scott Bray presented video evidence that had never been shown publicly before. The footage, captured by military personnel during routine training exercises, showed objects that appeared to exhibit controlled flight despite having no visible means of propulsion. The objects moved with precision and purpose, responding to the presence of military aircraft in ways that suggested awareness and intelligence. One of the most disturbing revelations to emerge from these hearings was the scope of encounters that had gone unreported for decades. ARROW officials testified that they were receiving hundreds of new reports from military personnel who had previously remained silent about their experiences due to career concerns or lack of proper reporting channels. Many of these reports described encounters that had occurred years or even decades earlier but had never been officially documented. The quality and consistency of these delayed reports provided additional confirmation that military personnel had been encountering genuinely anomalous phenomena for far longer than had been officially acknowledged. The witnesses included radar operators, pilots, maintenance personnel, and intelligence analysts whose professional training made them particularly reliable observers of unusual aerial activity. Their accounts often included technical details that could be verified against equipment records and flight logs, providing corroborating evidence for encounters that had previously existed only in personal memory. Commander Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot who had become one of the most articulate advocates for serious investigation of these phenomena, testified about encounters that had become routine during training exercises off the East Coast. He described objects that would maintain formation with military aircraft for extended periods, seemingly observing or studying human flight operations. These encounters were so frequent that they had become a standard part of flight briefings, with pilots being warned to watch for objects that could pose collision hazards. The normalization of these encounters within military units raised troubling questions about the adequacy of current air defense systems. If objects of unknown origin were regularly operating in restricted military training areas, what did this mean for the security of civilian airspace or critical infrastructure? The objects demonstrated capabilities that would allow them to penetrate any airspace at will, rendering traditional defense systems effectively meaningless. Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, in his role as director of AARO, provided increasingly detailed briefings about the technical characteristics of the objects being encountered. His presentations included radar data, infrared imagery, and electromagnetic sensor readings that painted a picture of phenomena that operated according to principles unknown to current science. The objects showed no heat signatures, despite achieving tremendous velocities, produced no sonic booms despite exceeding the speed of sound, and demonstrated maneuverability that would generate G-forces lethal to any biological pilot. The electromagnetic effects associated with these encounters continued to puzzle investigators. Military equipment designed to operate in contested electronic warfare environments was being jammed or disabled by unknown sources during encounters with these objects. The precision and effectiveness of these electronic attacks suggested understanding of military systems that exceeded the capabilities of any known adversary, while the selective nature of the interference implied intelligence and purpose rather than random electromagnetic phenomena. Advanced radar systems were detecting objects that appeared solid to some sensor types while remaining invisible to others, suggesting mastery of electromagnetic signature control that far exceeded current stealth technology. The objects could apparently modulate their visibility to different detection methods at will, appearing on radar screens when they chose to be seen while remaining invisible when they preferred to avoid detection. The international cooperation that had developed around investigation of these phenomena revealed that similar encounters were being documented worldwide. The Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance began sharing classified reports that showed remarkable consistency in the types of objects being observed and their flight characteristics. Australian, Canadian, British, and New Zealand military personnel were reporting encounters with objects exhibiting the same impossible capabilities documented by American forces. European Space Agency officials began acknowledging that their satellite tracking systems were detecting objects in Earth orbit that did not correspond to any known spacecraft or debris. These objects demonstrated controlled movement that defied orbital mechanics, changing their trajectories in ways that would require propulsion systems far advanced beyond current human space technology. Some appeared to move between Earth orbit and the atmosphere, suggesting trans-atmospheric capabilities that no human technology possessed. The Japanese self-defense forces released previously classified footage showing objects tracked by their advanced radar systems that exhibited flight characteristics identical to those reported by American military personnel. The objects accelerated to tremendous speeds while making sharp directional changes that would be impossible for any conventional aircraft. The international consistency of these encounters strengthened the case for phenomena that represented genuine technological advancement rather than experimental human systems. Private research organizations began developing theoretical frameworks for understanding how the observed capabilities might be achieved. The Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies brought together physicists, engineers, and aerospace experts to analyze the implications of the documented flight characteristics. Their preliminary conclusions suggested that explaining these phenomena would require revolutionary advances in multiple scientific disciplines simultaneously. Dr. Hal Puthoff, who had consulted with government investigation programs for decades, published research suggesting that the objects might be manipulating the zero-point energy field, a theoretical source of energy that exists in the quantum vacuum. This would potentially explain their apparent ability to achieve tremendous acceleration without reaction mass and their efficient energy utilization that produced no detectable waste heat. The concept of zero-point energy manipulation remained highly speculative, but it represented one of the few theoretical frameworks that could potentially explain the observed capabilities. If such technology were possible, it would revolutionize human understanding of physics and provide virtually limitless clean energy. The implications for human civilization would be as profound as the discovery of fire or the development of agriculture. Materials scientists analyzing the few alleged physical samples from these encounters continued to find isotopic ratios and molecular structures that differed from known terrestrial materials. While the authenticity of these samples remained disputed, their unusual properties included crystalline structures that appeared to have been formed under conditions not found naturally on Earth, and strength-to-weight ratios that exceeded theoretical limits for conventional materials. The development of artificial intelligence systems capable of analyzing vast databases of encounter reports revealed patterns that human investigators had missed. Machine learning algorithms identified correlations between encounter frequency and various astronomical phenomena, suggesting that the object's activities might be influenced by cosmic events or cycles that remained poorly understood. AI analysis also revealed that the objects showed apparent learning behavior, adapting their responses to human military tactics and technology over time. Early encounters often involved objects that allowed close approach by military aircraft, while more recent encounters showed objects that maintained greater distances and demonstrated more sophisticated evasion techniques. This suggested either evolving artificial intelligence or conscious adaptation by intelligent operators. The psychological impact of these revelations on the scientific community was profound. Researchers who had dedicated their careers to understanding the limits of what was possible in physics and engineering found themselves confronted with evidence that those limits were apparently much higher than previously believed. This required fundamental reassessment of scientific assumptions and theoretical frameworks. Universities began establishing research programs specifically focused on anomalous aerospace phenomena, marking the first time that mainstream academic institutions had taken these subjects seriously. The Harvard Galileo project expanded its sensor networks and began collaborating with government agencies to share data and analytical capabilities. Other institutions followed suit, recognizing that understanding these phenomena might lead to revolutionary advances in science and technology. The emergence of high-resolution commercial satellite imagery provided unprecedented opportunities to document these phenomena from space. Objects exhibiting anomalous flight characteristics were being captured by multiple satellite systems simultaneously, creating comprehensive documentation that could be analyzed using advanced image processing techniques. The consistency of observations across different satellite systems eliminated the possibility of instrument malfunction or software error. Space-based observations also revealed that some encounters occurred at altitudes far above the operational ceiling of any known aircraft. Objects were being detected at altitudes exceeding 100,000 feet, while demonstrating controlled flight characteristics that ruled out balloons or other passive atmospheric phenomena. The ability to operate effectively at such altitudes suggested propulsion systems that did not depend on atmospheric interaction. The economic implications of potential technological breakthroughs based on understanding these phenomena began attracting attention from private industry and investment communities. If the observed capabilities could be reverse engineered or understood, the resulting technologies would revolutionize transportation, energy production, and countless other industries. The potential economic impact was measured in trillions of dollars and could fundamentally alter global power structures. Defense contractors found themselves in the unusual position of trying to develop countermeasures against technology that exceeded their understanding. Traditional approaches to air defense assumed adversaries operating within known physical constraints, but these objects demonstrated capabilities that rendered conventional defensive thinking obsolete. New theoretical frameworks were needed for defending against threats that could apparently ignore traditional limitations of physics and engineering. The revelation that these phenomena had been systematically documented but hidden from public view for decades also raised serious questions about governmental transparency and democratic accountability. Citizens and their elected representatives had been kept uninformed about encounters that could have profound implications for national security, scientific understanding, and humanity's place in the universe. Congressional investigators began examining how such extensive secrecy had been maintained across multiple administrations and government agencies. The scope of the cover-up suggested institutional capabilities for managing classified information that exceeded what most observers had believed possible. This raised concerns about what other significant information might be hidden from public view and democratic oversight. The media's role in covering these revelations also evolved significantly. Major news organizations that had previously relegated reports of unexplained aerial phenomena to entertainment sections began treating them as serious news stories worthy of investigative journalism. The credibility of military witnesses and the official acknowledgement of government investigation programs made it impossible to dismiss these stories as fringe phenomena. Investigative journalists began examining decades of government documents, congressional budget allocations, and military contractor activities, looking for additional evidence of hidden investigation programs. Freedom of Information Act requests revealed the existence of numerous classified studies and research programs that had never been publicly acknowledged, suggesting that the official disclosures represented only a fraction of government knowledge about these phenomena. As public awareness of these revelations grew, polling data showed surprising levels of acceptance among civilian populations. Rather than widespread panic or disbelief, surveys indicated that most people were prepared to accept the possibility that unexplained aerial phenomena might represent advanced technology from unknown sources. This suggested that decades of science fiction and gradual disclosure had prepared public consciousness for revelations that might previously have been considered impossible to accept. Religious communities also showed remarkable adaptability in incorporating these revelations into their theological frameworks. Rather than viewing potential non-human intelligence as threatening to religious belief, many faith leaders suggested that such discoveries would expand rather than diminish understanding of creation and divine purpose. The Vatican's openness to these possibilities reflected broader acceptance within mainstream religious institutions. The cumulative impact of these revelations was beginning to reshape fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in the universe, the limits of scientific knowledge, and the adequacy of current technological understanding. The evidence suggested that Earth was being visited or observed by intelligence possessing capabilities that exceeded human achievement by extraordinary margins, raising questions that would require unprecedented cooperation between governments, scientists, and institutions to address. The profound implications of these revelations began manifesting in ways that extended far beyond military encounters and government investigations, rippling through every aspect of human society as the reality of advanced non-human technology operating in our skies became impossible to ignore. The questions that emerged were no longer simply about what these objects were or where they came from, but about what their presence meant for humanity's future and how our species would adapt to the knowledge that we were not alone, and certainly not the most technologically advanced intelligence in our local cosmic neighborhood. The scientific revolution that these phenomena demanded was unlike anything in human history. Previous scientific paradigm shifts, from Newtonian mechanics to quantum theory to relativity, had expanded human understanding while remaining within the realm of purely terrestrial knowledge. The capabilities demonstrated by these objects suggested principles of physics and engineering that transcended not just current human knowledge, but current human imagination. They operated according to rules that seemed to bend or ignore fundamental laws that science had considered inviolable. Dr. Michio Kaku, the renowned theoretical physicist, began publicly discussing how the observed phenomena might be explained through concepts from advanced physics that remained purely theoretical for human science. The object's ability to accelerate instantaneously without apparent reaction mass suggested mastery of inertial control that would require manipulation of the Higgs field, or fundamental forces that humans barely understood conceptually, let alone practically. The energy signatures, or rather the complete absence of detectable energy waste from these objects, implied power sources and energy conversion systems that achieved near-perfect efficiency. In human technology, energy conversion always produces waste heat, electromagnetic emissions, or other detectable byproducts. These objects seemed to violate thermodynamic principles by converting energy with no apparent loss, suggesting understanding of physics that transcended current scientific frameworks. Materials analysis of the alleged physical samples continued to yield results that challenged conventional understanding. The isotopic ratios found in some samples suggested formation processes that did not occur naturally on Earth, while the molecular structures exhibited properties that exceeded theoretical limits for strength, conductivity, and other characteristics. If authentic, these materials represented manufacturing techniques that were centuries or millennia beyond current human capabilities. The transmedium capabilities demonstrated by these objects, seamlessly moving between air and water environments, suggested mastery of fluid dynamics that eliminated the tremendous energy costs typically associated with medium transitions. Conventional submarines require significant structural modifications and energy expenditure to operate efficiently underwater, while aircraft are optimized for atmospheric flight. These objects seemed equally comfortable in both environments without any observable modifications or performance degradation. The electromagnetic effects associated with encounters continued to puzzle researchers and military personnel alike. The precise targeting of specific electronic systems while leaving others unaffected suggested real-time analysis capabilities that could identify and exploit vulnerabilities in complex technological systems within seconds. This implied artificial intelligence or consciousness that could understand and manipulate human technology with supernatural efficiency. Former Pentagon intelligence analyst Luis Elizondo, in increasingly detailed public presentations, described encounter reports that had remained classified for decades. These accounts involved objects that demonstrated apparent awareness of human thoughts and intentions, responding to mental commands or unspoken decisions in ways that suggested telepathic communication or technology that could monitor human neural activity remotely. The implications of potential consciousness reading technology were staggering for military and civilian applications alike. If these objects could monitor human thoughts or emotional states, conventional concepts of privacy, security, and autonomy would become meaningless. The strategic implications for military operations were profound, as any human-based intelligence gathering or decision-making process could potentially be monitored by unknown entities. Dr. Gary Nolan, a Stanford University professor who had been analyzing biological samples from alleged encounter witnesses, reported finding unusual patterns in the brain scans of individuals who claimed direct interaction with these phenomena. The neurological changes suggested exposure to electromagnetic fields or other environmental factors that did not occur in normal human experience, providing potential biological evidence for close encounters that had previously relied solely on witness testimony. The consistency of these neurological patterns across different witnesses who had no contact with each other strengthened the case for genuine physical interactions rather than psychological phenomena. The brain changes were measurable and specific, occurring in regions associated with intuitive processing and pattern recognition. This suggested that encounters with these objects might produce lasting effects on human consciousness and cognitive capability. International cooperation in investigating these phenomena reached unprecedented levels as governments realized that understanding these objects was beyond the capability of any single nation. The establishment of formal information sharing agreements between allies marked the first time that classified military encounter data had been systematically shared for scientific analysis rather than intelligence purposes. The European Union established its own investigation office, coordinating research efforts across member nations and sharing data with American and other allied investigation programs. The consistency of encounter reports across different countries and cultures eliminated the possibility that these phenomena represented classified technology from any terrestrial source, as no nation possessed the industrial or scientific infrastructure necessary to develop such capabilities in secret. Russia and China, initially reluctant to acknowledge their own encounters with these phenomena, began contributing data to international databases as the global nature of the encounters became undeniable. Chinese military researchers released footage showing objects tracked by their advanced radar systems that exhibited identical flight characteristics to those documented by American forces. The objects showed no regard for international boundaries, operating freely across the airspace of multiple nations regardless of political tensions or military readiness. The Vatican's Pontifical Academy of Sciences hosted international conferences bringing together scientists, theologians, and government officials to discuss the implications of potential non-human intelligence. These gatherings represented unprecedented cooperation between secular and religious institutions in addressing questions that challenged fundamental assumptions about humanity's place in creation. Pope Francis issued statements suggesting that the Catholic Church would welcome contact with intelligent life from elsewhere in the universe, viewing such discoveries as expansion of divine creation rather than challenge to religious doctrine. This position influenced other religious organizations to develop theological frameworks that could accommodate the reality of non-human intelligence while maintaining core spiritual beliefs. The psychological impact on human populations varied significantly across different demographic groups. Younger generations, raised on science fiction and digital technology, showed greater acceptance of the possibility that advanced non-human intelligence might be visiting Earth. Older populations, particularly those with military or technical backgrounds, often struggled more with implications that challenged lifetime assumptions about human technological supremacy. Mental health professionals reported increasing numbers of clients seeking help with existential anxiety related to humanity's place in the universe. The realization that humans might not be the dominant intelligence in their local cosmic environment challenged fundamental assumptions about purpose, meaning, and future that many individuals found disturbing. Support groups and counseling services began developing specifically to help people process these paradigm-shifting revelations. Educational institutions faced the challenge of integrating these phenomena into curricula that had been designed around assumptions of human technological leadership and terrestrial isolation. Physics and engineering programs began including theoretical frameworks for understanding capabilities that exceeded current human achievement, while philosophy and sociology departments grappled with implications for human identity and social organization. The economic implications of potential technological breakthroughs based on understanding these phenomena attracted massive investment from private industry. Companies began funding research programs aimed at reverse engineering or understanding the propulsion systems, energy sources, and materials technologies demonstrated by these objects. The potential returns on such investments were measured in trillions of dollars and could fundamentally reshape global economic structures. Aerospace companies found their most advanced research projects suddenly appearing primitive compared to the capabilities demonstrated by these objects. The objects achieved performance levels that represented centuries of advancement beyond current human technology, making conventional approaches to aircraft and spacecraft development seem quaint by comparison. This created both existential threats to existing industries and unprecedented opportunities for revolutionary advancement. Energy companies began exploring theoretical frameworks for power generation that could achieve the near-perfect efficiency demonstrated by these objects. If such technology could be understood and developed, it would eliminate most forms of environmental pollution while providing virtually unlimited clean energy. The implications for climate change, economic development, and human civilization were profound. The defense implications of these revelations continued to challenge traditional approaches to national security. If potential adversaries possessed technology that could penetrate any airspace at will, disable critical systems remotely, and operate with impunity across international boundaries, conventional military thinking became obsolete. New theoretical frameworks were needed for defending against threats that transcended traditional physical and technological limitations. Military strategists began developing contingency plans for scenarios involving contact or conflict with intelligence possessing capabilities that exceeded human technology by extraordinary margins. These planning exercises revealed the inadequacy of current defense systems and highlighted the need for fundamental advances in human technology and international cooperation. The possibility that these objects represented surveillance or reconnaissance activities by non-human intelligence raised disturbing questions about privacy and autonomy on a planetary scale. If advanced intelligence had been monitoring human activities for decades or longer, humanity's development had been observed and possibly influenced in ways that remained completely unknown. The nuclear weapons connection that appeared consistently in encounter reports suggested that humanity's most destructive technologies were of particular interest to whatever intelligence operated these objects. This could represent concern about human destructive capability, scientific curiosity about nuclear physics, or strategic intelligence gathering about human military capabilities. Former missile launch officers continued coming forward with accounts of nuclear weapons systems being disabled during encounters with these objects. The precision and scope of these electronic intrusions demonstrated detailed knowledge of critical military systems and the ability to interfere with them without causing permanent damage. The implications for nuclear security and strategic deterrence were profound. As these revelations accumulated, the scientific community faced unprecedented challenges in developing theoretical frameworks that could explain the observed capabilities while maintaining consistency with established physical laws. The objects seemed to operate according to principles that transcended current scientific understanding, requiring either revolutionary advances in physics or acknowledgement that current knowledge was fundamentally incomplete. The emergence of citizen citizen science initiatives allowed private researchers to contribute to investigation efforts using commercially available technology. Networks of amateur astronomers, electronics enthusiasts, and software developers began deploying sensor systems and analytical capabilities that supplemented government and academic research programs. This democratization of investigation created unprecedented opportunities for discovery, while ensuring that knowledge about these phenomena could not be suppressed or controlled by any single institution. Social media and internet communications enabled real-time sharing of encounter reports and analytical findings, creating global communities of researchers and witnesses that transcended national boundaries and institutional limitations. This network effect accelerated the pace of discovery, while ensuring that information about these phenomena remained accessible to public scrutiny and independent analysis. The cumulative impact of these revelations was beginning to catalyze a transformation in human consciousness that paralleled the greatest paradigm shifts in history. The knowledge that advanced non-human intelligence was actively present in humanity's environment challenged every assumption about our species' uniqueness, technological advancement, and cosmic significance. The questions being asked were no longer simply about unexplained aerial phenomena, but about humanity's readiness for contact with intelligence that possessed capabilities beyond our current comprehension. The stage was set for revelations and developments that would determine whether humanity could successfully transition from a species that believed itself alone in the universe to one that recognized its place among intelligences that had achieved technological and possibly spiritual advancement far beyond current human achievement. The choices made in response to these phenomena would shape the trajectory of human civilization for generations to come. As we find ourselves in this unprecedented moment of revelation and recognition, the full scope of what humanity faces becomes clear in the quiet hours when the evidence speaks louder than any explanation we might offer. The accumulated weight of thousands of encounters, documented by the most credible observers our civilization has produced, creates a reality that can no longer be dismissed, explained away, or hidden behind walls of secrecy that have finally crumbled under the pressure of truth. The patterns that emerge from decades of careful documentation paint a picture that challenges every assumption we have held about our place in the universe and our understanding of what intelligence can achieve. These objects, witnessed by fighter pilots with thousands of hours of flight experience, tracked by the most sophisticated radar systems ever developed, and recorded by instruments designed to detect the impossible, represent technology that operates according to principles we have not yet discovered and capabilities we can barely imagine. The silence with which they move through our skies, achieving velocities that should shatter the sound barrier, yet producing no sonic boom, suggests mastery of acoustic physics that transcends our current understanding. The instantaneous acceleration from stationary positions to thousands of miles per hour implies energy sources and propulsion methods that operate outside the framework of reaction-based systems that have defined human flight since we first took to the air. Most profoundly, the transmedium capabilities demonstrated by these objects, moving seamlessly between air and water with no apparent loss of performance or structural modification, points toward engineering principles that treat the fundamental forces of nature as variables to be manipulated rather than constraints to be accommodated. This represents not just technological advancement, but a different relationship with physical reality itself. The electromagnetic effects that accompany so many of these encounters, the precise ability to disable specific electronic systems while leaving others untouched, suggests not only advanced technology, but intelligence sophisticated enough to analyze and understand human systems in real time. The objects demonstrate knowledge of our most classified military capabilities and the ability to neutralize them selectively, implying reconnaissance and intelligence gathering that has been ongoing for far longer than we have been aware. The nuclear weapons facilities that have experienced repeated encounters with these phenomena tell a story that goes beyond casual observation. The objects show specific interest in humanity's most destructive technologies, appearing at missile silos, weapons storage facilities, and nuclear power plants with consistency that suggests purpose rather than coincidence. Former missile launch officers have described events where entire squadrons of nuclear weapons were rendered inoperable during encounters, only to return to normal function after the objects departed. This pattern of interaction with nuclear technology raises questions about intention that we are only beginning to formulate. Are these demonstrations of concern about humanity's destructive capabilities, scientific curiosity about nuclear physics, or strategic intelligence gathering about our defensive systems? The answer remains hidden, but the consistency of the pattern across decades and installations suggests that whatever intelligence operates these objects considers our nuclear capabilities worthy of careful attention. The global nature of these encounters eliminates any possibility that they represent classified human technology. Objects exhibiting identical flight characteristics have been observed by military personnel from every major nation, crossing international boundaries with complete disregard for political tensions or territorial sovereignty. The technological capabilities required to achieve such performance exceed the industrial and scientific infrastructure of any terrestrial civilization, including our own. The materials analysis of alleged physical samples continues to yield results that challenge our understanding of what is possible in manufacturing and molecular engineering. Isotopic ratios that do not match terrestrial patterns, crystalline structures that appear to have been formed under conditions not found on Earth, and strength-to-weight characteristics that exceed theoretical limits for known substances suggest manufacturing processes that operate according to principles we have not yet discovered. The few individuals who claim direct interaction with these phenomena show measurable neurological changes in brain regions associated with intuitive processing and pattern recognition. These changes are consistent across different witnesses who have had no contact with each other, suggesting exposure to fields or forces that produce specific biological effects. The implications for consciousness research and our understanding of how intelligence interfaces with reality are profound. The speed with which official attitudes have shifted from denial to acknowledgement to active investigation reflects the overwhelming nature of the evidence rather than any sudden change in governmental transparency. Military personnel who remained silent for decades about encounters that challenged their understanding of technology and physics have found their voices as the climate of ridicule and career damage has given way to serious scientific investigation. The congressional hearings that now regularly address these phenomena represent a fundamental shift in how our democratic institutions approach information that challenges established paradigms. Elected officials from both political parties acknowledge that objects of unknown origin are regularly operating in the most restricted airspace in the world, demonstrating capabilities that exceed known human technology by extraordinary margins. The academic institutions that are now establishing research programs focused on anomalous aerospace phenomena mark the entry of mainstream science into a field that was previously relegated to the margins of serious inquiry. Universities are deploying sensor networks, analyzing encounter data, and developing theoretical frameworks for understanding capabilities that seem to transcend current scientific knowledge. The artificial intelligence systems that analyze vast databases of encounter reports reveal patterns invisible to human investigators. Machine learning algorithms identify correlations between encounter timing and various environmental factors, suggesting that the objects operate according to schedules or purposes that follow logic we do not yet understand. The consistency of their capabilities across decades of observation suggests stable technology rather than experimental or developmental systems. The international cooperation that has emerged around investigation of these phenomena represents unprecedented sharing of classified military information for scientific rather than intelligence purposes. Allied nations are contributing encounter data that reveals the truly global nature of these observations, while former adversaries acknowledge similar experiences that eliminate any possibility of terrestrial origin for the most extraordinary cases. The religious institutions that have embraced the possibility of non-human intelligence visiting Earth demonstrate remarkable adaptability in incorporating paradigm-shifting revelations into theological frameworks. Rather than viewing such discoveries as threatening to spiritual belief, many faith leaders suggest that contact with advanced intelligence would expand rather than diminish understanding of creation and divine purpose. The generational differences in how human populations process these revelations reflect the profound nature of the paradigm shift they represent. Younger people, raised on science fiction and digital technology, show greater acceptance of the possibility that Earth might be visited by advanced, non-human intelligence. Older populations, particularly those with technical or military backgrounds, often struggle more with implications that challenge lifetime assumptions about human technological supremacy. The economic implications of understanding the technologies demonstrated by these objects could revolutionize human civilization. Energy systems that achieve near-perfect conversion efficiency would eliminate most forms of environmental pollution while providing virtually unlimited clean power. Propulsion systems that manipulate gravitational or electromagnetic fields would transform transportation and space exploration. Materials with properties that exceed current theoretical limits would enable construction projects of unprecedented scale and durability. The defense implications challenge every assumption underlying current military thinking. Objects that can penetrate any airspace at will, disable critical systems remotely, and operate with impunity across international boundaries render conventional military concepts obsolete. New theoretical frameworks are needed for defending against or coexisting with intelligence that possesses capabilities beyond current human comprehension. The consciousness implications may be the most profound of all. If these objects are operated by intelligence that can monitor human thoughts or emotional states, as some encounter reports suggest, conventional concepts of privacy, autonomy, and individual agency would require fundamental revision. The possibility that human development has been observed or influenced by non-human intelligence raises questions about free will and self-determination that go to the core of human identity. The citizen science networks that have emerged to supplement official investigation efforts demonstrate the democratization of knowledge that characterizes the information age. Private researchers using commercially available technology contribute to investigation efforts while ensuring that knowledge about these phenomena remains accessible to public scrutiny and independent analysis. As we contemplate the implications of these revelations in the quiet hours when sleep approaches and the mind processes the extraordinary nature of what we have learned, we find ourselves at a threshold unlike any in human history. The evidence accumulated over decades of careful documentation points toward the presence of intelligence possessing capabilities that transcend our current understanding of what is possible in physics, engineering, and consciousness itself. The objects that move through our skies with such extraordinary capabilities represent more than advanced technology. They suggest intelligence that has achieved mastery over fundamental forces that we are only beginning to understand theoretically. Their apparent interest in our nuclear capabilities, their systematic presence at military installations, and their consistent demonstration of capabilities that exceed human achievement by extraordinary margins paint a picture of phenomena that demand our most serious attention and careful study. The transformation in official attitudes from denial to acknowledgement to active investigation reflects not governmental transparency, but the overwhelming nature of evidence that could no longer be contained or explained away. Military personnel trained to understand and operate the most sophisticated human technology found themselves confronted with objects that made their advanced systems seem primitive by comparison. The questions that emerge from this evidence extend far beyond simple curiosity about advanced technology. They touch the foundations of human understanding about intelligence, consciousness, and our place in a universe that suddenly seems far less empty than we had believed. The capabilities demonstrated by these objects suggest not just technological advancement, but different relationships with physical reality that challenge our most basic assumptions about what is possible. In these quiet moments of reflection, as we process evidence that demands fundamental revision of our understanding, we find ourselves witnesses to revelations that will define the trajectory of human civilization for generations to come. The choices we make in response to these phenomena, the openness with which we approach questions that challenge our deepest assumptions, and the courage with which we face implications that transform our understanding of ourselves and our cosmos will determine whether humanity successfully navigates this unprecedented threshold. The mystery continues to unfold in the darkness above us, carried by objects that move with purpose we do not yet understand, operated by intelligence we have not yet met, demonstrating capabilities that inspire both wonder and humility in those who witness them. In the silence between revelation and understanding, between question and answer, we find ourselves part of a story larger than we had imagined, participants in a cosmic narrative that is only beginning to reveal itself to human awareness.